everyone. This is a video to quickly go over rhythmic subdivisions. Okay, we've talked about how to notate the highness and lowness of a pitch, and now we move on to thinking about how long or short a sound is. We start with this guy over here, just an open circle, and we've used that to in a few exercises now. This is called a whole note. Okay, and it's called a whole note in part because we're going to start dividing this as if it were sort of a pizza. Okay, so let's say a pizza, sort of see the pizza over here, includes the whole pie. Okay, so that's the duration that we start with. Now we're going to divide this into half, and so if let's say the whole note lasts 4 seconds long, something like that. The half note is half of that, and that's only going to last 2 seconds, for example. Okay, so this is called a half note. And you can think about this on the pizza analogy that we're just splitting the pizza in half. Right? So now a half of it is a half note. Move the camera a little bit so we can see a little bit better. Okay, now in the same instance we can keep dividing this and divide the half note into 2 parts, and then we have a quarter note. Okay. By the way, the half note is just an open circle with a line, a vertical line, and that's called a stem. Okay. And the stems can point up or down, and when it's pointing up it's going to the right. When it's pointing down it's going to the left. Okay. So when it's pointing down it's going to go like that. But it means exactly the same thing. Quarter note looks like that. I'm going to write down quarter note here to keep track. Okay, and it's the same thing as a half note visually, but the whole the circle here is now filled in, and so that's sort of dividing the pie here again into a quarter. So then that's a quarter note. Okay, so you can see here, even in this pie, okay, a whole note duration would equal to a half note and 2 quarter notes, or 2 half notes, or 4 quarter notes. Right? So for some of the puzzles that we're going to do, I'm going to ask you to figure out some equations, math problems with these notes. Very, very simple arithmetic, okay? But the thing you have to remember is the relationship between these notes. Okay? 2 more types. Okay? The half of a quarter note, I'm going to move the camera up a little bit. Half of the quarter note, it's called an eighth note. It basically looks like a quarter note, but it has a flag. Okay, this is an eighth note. And once we start adding these flags, each flag essentially halves the note, or divides into half. So by adding a flag here to the quarter note, we're cutting that length in half. Right? And then you can further divide the eighth note into 2 parts, and that's called a 16th note. Okay. Now, that's just the notes. We also in music have something called rests. Okay? And for rests, it's basically exactly the same thing as a note. However, when you see a rest, it tells you to not play for that amount of time, to not do anything for that amount of time instead of playing for that amount of time. Okay? And the whole rest, okay, looks like this. So I have to draw the staff here. Okay? And it hangs on the bottom, from the bottom of the 4th line, with sort of a black rectangle. That's the whole rest. Okay, half of that is the half rest. It looks similar to the whole rest, although it's now sort of a black rectangle sitting on top of the 3rd line. Okay, moving the camera here a little bit so you can see it a little better. All right. The quarter rest looks like this, little squiggly line. I usually draw it with sort of a sideways Z and then a C. Z for zoo, C for cat. That's a quarter rest. An eighth rest starts with a dot, a little swoop, and then a line. Looks like a 7. And that's an eighth rest. Okay, and then a 16th rest, similar to an eighth rest, now with 2 little swoops. 16th rest. Okay, so that's an overview of the notes and rests.